The wind howled like grief itself when Lena stopped her truck. Through the blur of snow, an old woman stood alone, her frail hand raised toward the storm, as if begging the heavens for mercy. Snow blanketed the valley like a sheet of silence. The sky hung heavy, the color of old steel, and the town of Winter's Hollow lay tucked beneath it, a handful of lights flickering against the storm. Lena Ward tightened her scarf and shoved open the cabin door, bracing herself for the bite of cold. The world outside was nothing but white, endless and merciless, and still she walked. She always did. Inside her pocket, folded carefully between worn fingers, was a list written in pencil. Milk, soup, lamp oil. Half of it she couldn't afford. The other half she didn't need. But writing the list gave her a reason to move. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. Her boots sank deep into the snow, crunching in rhythm with her breath. Each step reminded her of how far she'd come since losing her parents 2 winters ago. The world had kept moving. She had learned to move with it. Barely. By the time she reached the small general store, her cheeks burned red and her eyelashes sparkled with frost. The bell chimed as she entered, drawing a smile from Mr. Clark behind the counter. "Storm's only getting worse," he said. "You planning to hole up for the weekend?" Lena nodded, her voice soft. "As much as I can." He slid her items into a brown bag and leaned in, lowering his tone. "You always make it through, Lena. Don't know how you do it." She smiled faintly. "Because stopping doesn't change the weather, Mr. Clark." Outside, she stood beneath the awning, watching flakes drift like tiny feathers. The world looked peaceful from this distance, but peace, she had learned, often came with loneliness. Across town, in a mansion perched on the hill above Winter's Hollow, Ethan Vale stood by a window with a glass of scotch untouched in his hand. The glass caught the firelight, reflecting in his tired eyes. He had come to the mountain estate to escape the noise, the shareholders, the tabloids, the hollow congratulations of people who wanted something from him. But silence, it turned out, was louder than applause. The house was beautiful, his mother's pride, but every wall held her voice, and every room reminded him of what he'd ignored for too long. He set the glass down, the ice clinking softly. A photo rested on the mantel, a younger version of his mother, smiling in front of a modest wooden cabin. Her handwriting scrawled across the back read, "The place that saved me." Ethan traced the frame with his thumb, his chest tightening. He didn't know what it meant, not really, but tonight he'd dreamed of her again. Snow. A woman's voice. A warning. He turned away, pushing the thought aside. His assistant had begged him to come back to the city. He refused. He needed quiet. He needed something else. Meanwhile, Lena trudged back home, her grocery bag clutched to her chest as the first growl of wind turned sharp. By the time she reached the forest road, visibility had dropped to a blur of white. "Come on," she whispered, squinting through the snow. The truck was only a few hundred yards away when she heard it, a soft, strained cry. She froze. There, half buried beside the roadside, was an old sedan. The driver's door hung open, snow piling on the seat. A shape moved inside, faintly. Lena's pulse jumped. Without thinking, she dropped her bag and ran toward it. Inside, An old woman, frail and trembling, sat gripping the steering wheel, her lips pale. "Oh my God!" Lena gasped, tugging at the door. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman's eyes fluttered open. "Sea cold," she whispered. "I can't start it." Lena reached in, brushing snow off her face. "It's okay. My cabin's not far. Can you walk?" A pause. Then the faintest nod. Lena helped her out, wrapping her coat around the stranger's shoulders. The wind cut through them both, but she held on tight. Each step through the snow was a battle, but Lena didn't stop. Not once. When they reached the cabin, Lena eased her into the chair near the fire and dropped to her knees, pulling off the woman's wet shoes. "You're safe now," she said, voice trembling. The woman smiled weakly. You shouldn't have stopped for me, dear." Lena met her gaze. No one should be left alone in a storm. The woman studied her, eyes shining like she saw something deeper. "Kindness is a rare fire, child. Keep it lit." Lena fetched soup, blankets, hot tea, her hands shaking from cold and adrenaline. They spoke little, but silence wasn't empty this time. It was full of breath, warmth, and quiet gratitude. Later, as the storm raged outside, the woman dozed off in the chair. Lena watched her for a while, wondering what kind of life she'd lived, what brought her here. But before she could ask, sleep pulled her under too. At dawn, the fire had dimmed, the storm had eased, and the old woman was gone. On the chair, neatly folded, lay a scarf of deep emerald wool, fine, expensive, unlike anything Lena owned. Tucked beneath it was a small note in elegant handwriting. "When the storm clears, so will your path." Lena stared at the words for a long time, unsure if she'd dreamed the night before. Outside, sunlight cracked through the clouds, glittering off the snow like 1,000 tiny mirrors. And somewhere beyond the ridge, a man named Ethan Vale woke with his mother's name on his lips and a sudden, inexplicable pull toward the valley below. Have you ever helped someone when you had almost nothing left to give? Tell me in the comments how it changed you. Morning broke soft and silent over winter's hollow. The storm had eased, leaving behind a fragile stillness, the kind that makes every sound feel sacred. Lena stood on her porch, mug of coffee in hand, her gaze tracing the endless white horizon. The emerald scarf hung around her neck now, its warmth strangely comforting, like an echo of gratitude she could still feel in her bones. She'd told herself the old woman must have wandered off when the storm cleared. Maybe a neighbor came for her. Maybe she wasn't as frail as she'd seemed. But part of Lena didn't quite believe it. Something about the woman lingered, the calm, the knowing look, the way she said, "Keep it lit." Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and melted wax. On the table lay her open journal, pages filled with scribbled thoughts and little sketches of the mountains. She picked up her pencil and wrote, "Kindness doesn't return the same way it's given. It finds its own path back." She smiled faintly, then set the pencil down, unaware how close that truth was to unfolding. By late morning, Lena bundled up to check the mailbox at the end of her long drive. The air was crisp, the world reborn under sunlight. Halfway down the trail, she noticed deep tire tracks, not hers, leading up toward the cabin. Her brows furrowed. No one ever came up here uninvited. The sound of an engine followed, slow and deliberate. She turned as a sleek black SUV emerged through the trees, its paint gleaming against the snow. It stopped just a few yards from her. The driver stepped out first, tall, sharp-suited, sunglasses despite the haze. He opened the rear door, and a man stepped out. He wasn't dressed for the mountains. Long coat, leather gloves, posture straight as command. His face was striking, but his expression unreadable, like someone used to power but tired of wielding it. "Miss Ward?" he asked. Lena froze. "Yes." He nodded once. "My name is Ethan Vale. I believe you helped my mother last night." The world tilted slightly. "Your mother?" "Yes." His tone softened. "She was caught in the snowstorm. She told me about you this morning." Lena blinked, confused. "That's impossible. She left before dawn. I didn't even know her name." Ethan's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the mountains. "She passed away early this morning." The breath left Lena's lungs. "What?" "She'd been ill for some time," he said quietly. "But she was lucid last night. Come. My staff said she spoke of a young woman who saved her. Said she'd found peace." The wind whispered between them. Lena's pulse thudded in her ears. She swallowed. "I didn't even know she was sick. I just did what anyone would have done." Ethan studied her. "You'd be surprised how few people stop." He pulled a small envelope from his coat. "She asked me to give you this." Lena hesitated before taking it. Her fingers brushed his glove, the briefest spark of warmth. The envelope was heavy, embossed with a crest she didn't recognize. Inside was a single folded note. The handwriting, the same elegant cursive, read, "For the one who reminded me what love once felt like, may the world return it tenfold." A check fell out. Lena's heart nearly stopped when she saw the number. $500,000. Her hands trembled. "No, no, I can't." Ethan raised a hand. "It was her wish. I didn't help her for money. I know." He looked away, his breath visible in the cold. "That's why she chose you." The words hung between them, heavy, unspoken, strange. Lena folded the check back into the envelope and handed it to him. "Please. I can't accept this. I did what anyone decent would have done." Ethan's expression flickered. Irritation, admiration, something deeper. "You think decency is that common, Miss Ward?" "Maybe not," she said, meeting his gaze. "But that's not the point." For a moment, silence wrapped them both. The air between them felt electric, charged with grief, gratitude, and something neither of them could name. Ethan exhaled slowly, lowering his eyes. "Then at least allow me to thank you properly." "Dinner. Tomorrow. I'll send a car." She shook her head. "I don't." He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You strike me as someone who doesn't say yes often." Lena crossed her arms. "You strike me as someone who's not used to hearing no." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then genuine amusement. "Touché." For the first time, the sharp billionaire softened. The tension cracked, just a little. Still, Lena stayed guarded. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Mr. Vale. But your mother didn't owe me anything, and neither do you." His voice dropped, quiet. "That's where you're wrong." He stepped closer, not menacing, just sincere. "You gave her peace when I couldn't. That matters." Lena's throat tightened. For a heartbeat, she saw the man behind the wealth, tired, grieving, human. She nodded once. "I'm sorry for your loss." He inclined his head, then turned toward his car. "Good day, Miss Ward." The SUV rolled down the snowy path, leaving silence in its wake. Lena stood frozen, watching until it vanished behind the trees. Only when she returned to the cabin did she realize her hands were still shaking. She set the envelope on the table, staring at it. The scarf, still draped over the chair, seemed to shimmer faintly in the light. She whispered, "Who were you?" No answer came, but outside, the wind shifted, gentle, almost approving. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the old woman's face beside the fire, and Ethan's expression when he spoke of her. There was something deeper there, something unsaid. She rose, pacing to the window. The snow had begun again, faintly, glowing under the moon. Somewhere down in the valley, she imagined the billionaire lying awake too, in his mansion, surrounded by everything but comfort. Two souls, both changed by the same woman, both staring at the same winter sky. If a stranger offered you a life-changing gift for an act of kindness, would you accept it, or walk away like Lena did? Tell me what you'd do. The next morning dawned grey and silent, the kind of light that made the world feel suspended between night and day. Lena sat at her table, staring at the untouched envelope. Every few minutes, she'd tell herself she'd return it, and every few minutes she'd falter. It wasn't the money that unsettled her. It was what it meant. People like Ethan Vale didn't show up at the doorsteps of women like her, and they certainly didn't owe her anything. She reached for the scarf on the chair, running her thumb along its fine threads. The fabric caught the light, glimmering faintly, like it held a memory she couldn't access. "Keep it lit," the woman had said. But how could you keep kindness burning when the world kept trying to snuff it out? In the mansion on the hill, Ethan stood in his mother's study, the note she'd left him open on her old desk. Her words were brief, yet they carried the weight of a lifetime. "You built everything but forgot the one thing that mattered. Heart. The girl in the snow showed me what you lost." He'd read it 5 times already, and each time it stung deeper. He was used to fixing things, businesses, deals, problems, but this wasn't something he could buy his way out of. He'd gone to thank Lena. That was all. Gratitude. Closure. But something about her eyes, fierce, clear, unafraid, had stayed with him. He turned from the window. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "She's a stranger." But strangers didn't make your chest tighten when you thought of them. Strangers didn't make you question everything you'd built your life on. By midday, the sky had darkened again, another storm gathering over the peaks. Lena bundled her coat tighter and made her way to the local library where she volunteered a few afternoons a week. The building was quiet, a haven of worn pages and the soft hum of a radiator. She shelved books to steady her mind. Her co-worker, Janie, peeked around the corner. "Hey, you see that news story about the Vale family?" Lena froze. "No. What about them?" "Apparently Ethan Vale's mother passed away yesterday. He's back in town. Billionaire's been off the radar for months. Some people say he's selling the estate." Lena's heart skipped. She forced a casual tone. "I didn't know he had property here." "Old family place," Janie said. "Weird guy, though. Heard he doesn't talk to anyone unless he has to." Lena smiled faintly. "Maybe he just prefers quiet. Or maybe he's one of those rich types who forgot what real people sound like." Lena's throat tightened. If only you knew, she thought. That night, she walked home under heavy clouds. Snow had begun to fall again, softer this time, like ash drifting from some unseen fire. When she reached her cabin, something caught her eye. A sleek car parked halfway down the drive. Her pulse quickened. Ethan stood beside it, coat collar up, hair damp with snow. He looked both out of place and oddly familiar, like the storm had deposited him there. Lena approached slowly. "You really don't give up, do you?" He smiled faintly. "I could say the same." She folded her arms. "If you came to talk me into taking that money, don't waste your breath." "I didn't," he said. "I came to return something." He reached into his coat and pulled out the emerald scarf. "You left this in the chair after our conversation." She frowned. "No, that's yours. Your mother left it." He shook his head. "She left it for you. She wanted you to have it. She told me that before she—" His voice broke slightly, and he cleared his throat. "Before she went." Lena hesitated, staring at him. He wasn't performing. There was no rehearsed grief, no practiced sympathy. Just honesty. She took the scarf back, her hands brushing his again. This time, neither pulled away. "Why does it matter so much to you?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Ethan looked past her, toward the glow of the cabin window. "Because she did. Somehow." Lena studied him, unsure what to say. There was something fractured in him, the kind of loneliness she recognized instantly. Still, she forced herself to step back. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Mr. Vale, but I don't belong in your world." He gave a soft laugh. "You think I do?" She raised an eyebrow. "I think you've spent a long time pretending you do." His expression shifted, the faintest crack in the armor. "I won't bother you again," he said finally. "But if you ever need anything—" "I don't," she interrupted gently. He nodded, looking into the fire. "I lost my father when I was a kid. Lost my mother yesterday. It doesn't get easier, does it?" Lena shook her head. "No, but you learn to live differently. You stop expecting the world to make sense." He looked at her then, really looked, the kind of gaze that strips away all pretense. "You speak like someone twice your age. Pain ages you faster than birthdays." For a moment, neither moved. A log collapsed in the fire, sending sparks upward. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "She liked you, you know. My mother. She said you reminded her of herself, before the money, before the noise." Lena smiled faintly. She had kind eyes. "She had a sharp tongue," he said with a soft laugh. "But she was right. You don't want her check, fine. But at least let me know you're okay. You live out here like someone who doesn't need saving," she finished. He met her eyes, guilt flickering there. "Maybe I'm just not used to anyone refusing help." "Then maybe that's the problem," she said gently. "You've forgotten how to offer it without expecting control in return." The words hit him harder than she knew. He looked down, jaw tight. "I didn't come here to control anything," he said quietly. "I came because I didn't know where else to go." Lena tilted her head. "Then sit. You're here now." Evening fell slowly. The storm grew worse, winds shrieking, snow hammering the roof. Power lines went down, plunging the cabin into a deep, flickering darkness lit only by the fire. Ethan and Lena sat close, wrapped in quiet. The tension had softened into something more human, not comfort, but recognition. He watched her for a moment, the orange glow painting her face. "Do you ever get tired of being strong?" She smiled sadly. "Every day. But no one else is going to do it for me." "You sound like her," he murmured. "Your mother." He nodded. "She used to say strength was just love with its armor on." "That's beautiful." He turned toward her, voice lower now. "She'd have liked you more than she liked me." "Then she must have been very forgiving," Lena teased softly. He laughed, a real, unguarded sound this time, and Lena found herself smiling too. Hours passed. The storm refused to rest. At some point, Ethan offered to keep the fire going while she slept. "You'll freeze if you stay up," she protested. "I'll manage." But when she awoke near dawn, he was slumped in the chair, coat still on, eyes closed, face lit faintly by the dying embers. For the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked a human. Lost. She rose quietly, draped a blanket over his shoulders, and whispered, "Even storms have to rest sometime." Then she stood by the window, watching the grey light seep through the cracks of a world still covered in white. Outside, the blizzard began to fade, slow and reluctant, like a curtain lifting at the end of a play neither of them had meant to join. Inside, two souls who'd resisted everything, connection, vulnerability, fate, had finally stopped fighting the silence. And in that silence, something fragile and new began to breathe. Have you ever been forced into a moment you didn't want, only to realize it was exactly what you needed? Tell your story below. It might inspire someone tonight. By morning, the storm had broken. A pale stillness lingered in its wake, the kind of hush that felt like the mountain holding its breath. Lena woke to sunlight spilling through the window. Ethan was gone from the chair, but not far. She found him outside, brushing snow from the porch rail. He looked strangely peaceful, like the night had thawed something unseen. "Morning," she said, wrapping her scarf around her. "Sleep well." "Better than I deserved," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "The road's still blocked. You might be my guest a little longer." His lips twitched. "Trapped with you in a snowstorm. I've had worse board meetings." "Bet those had better catering," she said. "None with your soup," he replied, and for a moment they both laughed, the sound echoing across the white expanse like a promise. Later, while Ethan tended the fire, Lena busied herself cleaning. The cabin's quiet gave her thoughts too much room to wander. She found herself studying him, how he carried himself, the way he seemed constantly fighting something invisible inside. He noticed her watching. "You think I'm impossible to read, don't you?" "Not impossible," she said. "Just complicated." He gave a rueful smile. "That's one word for it. What's the real word?" He hesitated. "Lonely." The honesty caught her off guard. It wasn't the kind of confession men like him made easily. Before she could respond, something caught her eye, a corner of fabric peeking out from beneath the old cedar chest near the fireplace. She knelt and tugged it free, an aged photo album, its leather cracked and edges yellowed. Ethan turned, curiosity piqued. "What's that?" "It was my mother's," Lena said softly, brushing dust off the cover. "I haven't looked through it since she passed." "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded. They sat side by side on the rug, the photo album between them. Inside were faded snapshots, Lena's parents smiling outside the cabin, snow piled high behind them. Her mother's handwriting looped beneath each picture. "First winter in Hollow. The day we built the porch. Our miracle snowstorm." Ethan leaned closer, eyes scanning the pages. He paused suddenly, hand stilling on one photo. "Wait," he whispered. The picture showed a much younger woman standing in front of the cabin, a familiar woman. Sharp cheekbones, kind eyes, and that same quiet grace. "That's her," Ethan said, voice low. "That's my mother." Lena frowned. "No, that can't be. This was decades ago. My parents." He turned the photo over. The handwriting on the back made her heart stutter. "Marjorie Vale, winter, 1984. The storm that changed everything." Ethan's pulse quickened. "She never told me she'd been here." Lena traced the words with her fingertip. "My mother wrote this. That means they knew each other." The air grew heavy with revelation. "Do you think your mother ever mentioned her name?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "She talked about a place she once called home, before my father. Said it was where she learned who she really was. I thought it was a metaphor. Lena swallowed hard. It wasn't. She meant here. Ethan leaned back, stunned. So your mother and mine crossed paths before either of us was born, she finished softly. The fire crackled between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Ethan reached for the photo again, his thumb brushing over his mother's smile. Maybe she came back to this place because she was trying to remember what it felt like to be herself again. Maybe finding you wasn't random at all. Lena's chest tightened. You think she planned it? Maybe not planned, he said. But maybe she believed the world still keeps promises, even after people forget them. Lena looked at the photograph, at her mother's handwriting looping across the back. The storm that changed everything. She whispered, "It's happening again." Ethan met her eyes, and for a heartbeat, they both felt it. The quiet pulse of something larger than coincidence. Later that afternoon, while searching for extra candles, Lena found something else tucked in the drawer of her mother's old writing desk, a small locket. She clicked it open, expecting a picture of her parents. But inside was a folded scrap of paper with one word scrawled in faded ink. Marjorie. Her mother had kept the name close for decades. She turned the locket over in her hand, heart pounding. When she returned to the living room, Ethan was still by the fire, staring at the photo in silence. She placed the locket on the table beside him. She remembered her, Lena said. All these years. Ethan opened the locket, reading the name, his eyes glassy with emotion. She always said someone saved her once, that she owed her happiness to a woman who refused to let her give up. Maybe that was your mother. Lena smiled faintly through the tears building in her eyes. And now, her daughter saved yours. He looked up, voice trembling. Maybe that's how love works. It loops back when you least expect it. She nodded slowly, like snow returning to the same mountain every year. Their gazes held, steady, fragile, charged with something that didn't need words. As evening fell, Ethan helped her stack wood by the porch. The storm had left the world crystalline, the air still, the trees heavy with frost. You ever think, he said quietly, that some people are meant to cross paths no matter what? Lena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Maybe it's not fate. Maybe it's unfinished kindness finding its way home. He smiled. I like that better. She turned to look at him, her breath visible in the cold. You really believe your mother found peace? He nodded. I do now. Lena's heart softened. Then I'm glad. As they stepped back inside, the warmth from the fire washed over them. The cabin no longer felt small, it felt full, and though neither said it out loud, both knew something sacred had been uncovered, something tying not just their mothers' lives, but their own. That night, Lena wrote in her journal again. Sometimes love doesn't arrive new. It returns, wearing the faces of those we've lost, waiting for us to notice it's never really gone. She closed the book and glanced toward the fire, where Ethan sat half asleep in the chair. The scarf, his mother's, lay folded neatly on the table between them, bridging two stories, two hearts, and two generations of storms that refused to keep them apart. By the next morning, the storm had loosened its grip on the mountain. A fragile sunlight shimmered across the drifts of snow like diamonds scattered by dawn. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to a steady glow. Ethan was already awake, sleeves rolled up, frying eggs over the old iron pan. Lena blinked in surprise when she saw him. You cook. He turned, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. When I'm not managing 8 companies and avoiding emotional honesty, yes, I do. She laughed, a sound that felt too big for the small cabin. Impressive, resume. He plated the food with mock seriousness. Breakfast a la exile, served with regret and existential dread. Smells like redemption, she teased. Close enough. They sat at the tiny table, steam rising from their mugs, the silence between them no longer awkward but comfortable, an invisible thread humming softly in the air. After breakfast, Lena stepped outside to shovel the porch steps. The snow was thick, but light now, the kind that gave way easily beneath effort. Ethan followed her out with a second shovel he found by the door. "You're not doing this alone." She shot him a look. What happened to the billionaire who probably never touched a shovel in his life? "He's evolving," he said with mock gravity. Lena grinned. "Careful. The altitude might be getting to you." For the next hour they worked side by side, their laughter echoing in the frosty air. Every shove of snow felt lighter somehow, as though shared effort carried a kind of healing in it. When they paused to rest, Ethan leaned on the shovel, watching her breath fog in the air. "You make this look easy." She smiled faintly. "You say that because you've never stayed long enough to know what hard feels like." His eyes darkened slightly, and she instantly regretted it. "I didn't mean—" "No," he said quietly. "You're right. I haven't stayed. Not anywhere. Not really. Why?" He looked toward the horizon. "Because it's easier to build walls than homes." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Lena's voice softened. "Maybe you were just waiting to find the right place to stop running." He looked back at her then, really looked, and in that gaze was something that stole her breath. Back inside, the afternoon stretched warm and lazy. The wind had gone still, and sunlight streamed through the frosted windows, catching the dust in soft golden spirals. Lena brewed tea while Ethan tuned the old radio on the counter. It crackled with static before catching a faint melody, a slow piano piece from some forgotten station. He glanced over. "You like music?" "Depends on the song." "What about this one?" She smiled. "It sounds like memory." He crossed to her, eyes softening. "Dance with me." Lena blinked. "What?" "Just one," he said quietly, extending his hand. "No strings, no promises. Just now." She hesitated, heart thudding. Then she placed her hand in his. They moved slowly, awkwardly at first, then easier. The room faded, the fire's glow flickering around them like an embrace. Ethan's hand rested gently against her back. Her head found his shoulder almost without permission. "I can't remember the last time I danced," she whispered. "Then let this be the first again," he murmured. The song filled the space between their breaths, a haunting, beautiful quiet. When it ended, they didn't pull apart immediately. Their eyes met, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's air. Lena's voice trembled. "You'll be leaving soon." Ethan swallowed. "I should. But you don't want to." He shook his head. "No, I don't." For a heartbeat, the world went perfectly still. The truth sat between them, fragile, undeniable. Then she stepped back, breaking the spell. "Storm's over. Roads will clear. You'll go back to New York, and I'll stay here. That's how these stories go, right?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe some stories are meant to be rewritten." Her heart fluttered, but she forced herself to look away. "Don't promise me anything, Ethan. I've had enough ghosts to last a lifetime." He nodded, though pain flickered across his face. "I'm not promising. I'm hoping." That evening, they sat by the fire again. The photo album lay open beside them, the two mothers smiling from the past. The scarf lay folded nearby, untouched since morning. Lena traced the photo's edges. "Do you think they knew this would happen?" Ethan smiled softly. "I think they'd laugh at how long it took us to figure it out." She chuckled. "Probably." Silence settled, comfortable, tender. He spoke first. "You said last night that love returns. Do you believe that?" She nodded slowly. "I think love is like snow. It melts, disappears, but it always finds a way back home." Ethan reached for the scarf, running it through his fingers. "Then maybe this, us, is love returning to the same mountain." Lena's eyes shimmered with tears she didn't try to hide. "Maybe it is." Later, as he prepared to sleep on the couch, she paused by the doorway. "Ethan." He looked up. "Thank you for not running this time." He smiled faintly. "Thank you for giving me somewhere to stop." For a moment neither moved, caught between what was safe and what was real. Then she whispered, "Good night." When she turned away, his voice followed softly. "Good night, Lena." She stood at the doorway longer than she meant to, her heart heavy and full all at once. Outside, the snow began to fall again, gentle this time, forgiving, like the mountain itself was blessing what was quietly growing between them. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Lena dreamed of two women standing in the snow, one holding out a scarf, the other holding out her hand. Between them a light flickered, small but steady, refusing to go out. The morning after their dance, the world was painfully bright. Sunlight bounced off the snow like shards of glass, cutting through the cabin windows. The storm had passed completely now, the world quiet, clean, and mercilessly clear. Lena stood at the sink, washing dishes she didn't need to wash. She could feel Ethan behind her, restless, pacing. The silence was thick, filled with things unsaid. Finally, he spoke. "The main road's open again. The plows came through at dawn." She froze, her fingers tightening around a glass. "So, you'll be leaving today?" He didn't answer right away. "My assistant's been trying to reach me. The company's expecting me back." But, she finished for him, "you have responsibilities, a life, people who need you." "Lena." She turned to face him, forcing a small smile. "You don't owe me an explanation, Ethan. The world doesn't stop because of a snowstorm." He took a step closer. "That's not what this was." "Then what was it?" she asked quietly. "Because where I come from, people don't build a life on 2 days of kindness and confusion." He flinched. "You think this was confusion?" "I think you're lonely," she said. "And I think I was convenient." The words landed like a slap, sharp, undeserved, but born of fear, not cruelty. He stared at her, wounded. "Convenient? You really think that little of me?" "I think," she whispered, "I've learned not to trust what happens in storms." The air between them cracked. Ethan turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You don't know me, Lena." "I know enough," she said softly. "You came here trying to fix something that wasn't broken." He turned back, eyes burning. "You think I wanted this? That I planned to walk into a stranger's life and feel—" He stopped himself, jaw tight. "No, you don't get to decide what this means to me." Lena swallowed, her voice trembling. "Then tell me what it does mean." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Just silence. Just the raw, aching truth he couldn't speak. That silence was her answer. She nodded slowly. "I thought so." He grabbed his coat, moving toward the door. "I can't do this right now." "Of course you can't," she said bitterly. "When things get hard, You leave. That's what men like you do. He froze mid-step, the accusation cutting deep. Men like me. You build walls, she said. You hide behind money, schedules, boardrooms, anything that keeps you from feeling small. You think control will protect you from pain. He turned, eyes blazing. And what about you? You hide too. In this cabin, in your grief, pretending the world stopped with your parents' deaths. You're not brave, Lena. You're scared to live. The words hit her like cold water. She blinked, tears spilling before she could stop them. Get out. Lena. Go. Her voice cracked, quiet but final. Ethan hesitated, torn between anger and regret, between leaving and begging her to stop him. But pride won, as it always had. He opened the door. The cold wind rushed in, snatching the warmth from the room as he stepped outside. Lena didn't move. The sound of his car door closing echoed like a heartbeat ending. Then the engine roared to life, fading into the distance until there was nothing left but silence, and the slow collapse of everything she hadn't been ready to lose. For a long time she stood there motionless, the scarf still hanging on its hook near the door. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, hands clutching the fabric as if it could hold her together. The scent of cedar and faint cologne still lingered, proof that it hadn't all been a dream. But dreams, she realized, always fade when morning comes. Ethan drove down the mountain road with snow still drifting around him. Every mile away felt heavier. He could hear her voice in his head. You hide behind money. You're scared to live. She was right. At the bottom of the hill, he pulled over, gripping the steering wheel. His breath fogged the windshield as his chest heaved with something he hadn't felt in years. Loss that wasn't financial, pain that wasn't fixable. He pressed his forehead to the steering wheel. "What are you doing?" he muttered. "You're walking away from the first real thing you've had in years." But the old habits were louder. Duty, order, control, the walls that had kept him safe his entire life. He started the engine again. Back in the cabin, night fell early. Lena sat by the fire, but the flames no longer warmed her. She replayed every word they'd said, every truth she'd thrown like a stone because she was too afraid to hope. Her journal lay open on the table. She wrote in shaking script, "It's easier to lose someone before they stay. Then you don't have to believe you're worth staying for." She stared at the sentence until the ink blurred through her tears. The scarf lay across her lap again. This time, she didn't see Marjorie Vale's gift. She saw Ethan, lost, proud, breaking in front of her and too afraid to let anyone see it. And maybe she'd been just as afraid. Days passed. The snow melted slowly, and life resumed its quiet rhythm. The roads filled with the sounds of trucks and travelers. The mountains seemed to forget what had happened, but Lena couldn't. Every creak of the cabin reminded her of laughter that had once filled it. Every sunrise carried the echo of his voice. But she told herself what she always had. Storms end, people leave, life goes on. She didn't know that miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the city, Ethan Vale was staring at his reflection, unable to sleep. The world around him had resumed its relentless pace. Meetings, calls, headlines, but he couldn't escape the silence she had left behind. He turned from the window and whispered into the emptiness. "You were right, Lena. I'm just scared to live." Days stretched into a week. The snow began to melt, leaving rivulets of water that trickled down the mountain like veins returning life to the land. Lena had gone back to her routine, chopping wood, visiting the library, pretending not to look for a car she knew wouldn't return. But inside, the silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow. She missed the sound of laughter breaking the quiet. The weight of another presence. the rhythm of conversation that felt like breathing. When she caught herself setting 2 mugs on the table out of habit, she stopped and let out a shaky laugh. "Pathetic," she muttered, though her voice trembled. That night, she lit the fire and sat alone, the scarf draped across her lap again. It had become a ritual, a fragile comfort, a connection to both past and almost love. She ran her thumb along the fabric, whispering, "You really didn't plan this, did you, Marjorie?" The scarf didn't answer, but something in the flames did. A memory flickered behind her eyes. Marjorie's frail hands clutching her own in that snowstorm, her voice faint but sure. "Kindness always finds its way home." Lena exhaled shakily. Then why hasn't he? In New York, Ethan stood before the boardroom window, the city pulsing far below him. His reflection stared back, immaculate suit, controlled expression, empty eyes. The same assistant who'd messaged him days ago entered quietly. "Mr. Vale, the quarterly report." He held up a hand. "Leave it." "Yes, sir." When the door shut again, Ethan turned back to the view. From up here, the city looked like a machine, efficient, endless, cold. He used to find comfort in that. Now it felt like noise. He saw flashes, Lena's laughter, her eyes lit by firelight, her words cutting through his walls like truth always does. "You're scared to live." He whispered, "You were right." That evening, he drove without telling anyone where he was going. The city fell away behind him. The highways grew emptier, the snow thicker. He didn't know what he'd say when he saw her, or if she'd even let him in. But the thought of never trying again felt worse than rejection. Love, he realized, wasn't about control. It was about surrender. Back on the mountain, Lena had fallen asleep in the chair by the fire, her journal open beside her. The flames had burned low, and the wind outside hummed like a lullaby. She dreamed again, of snow and laughter and 2 women standing beneath the same winter sky, their voices overlapping. "Keep it lit. Don't be afraid to love again." She woke with tears on her face. The wind had quieted. Something felt different, as if the mountain itself was waiting for her to do something. She rose, wrapped the scarf around her shoulders, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, clean. The horizon glowed faintly with dawn. And there, far down the road, headlights approached, slow, uncertain, real. Her heart stuttered. "No," she whispered, almost afraid to believe. But the car kept coming. Ethan parked halfway up the drive and stepped out into the cold. He looked exhausted, not from travel, but from carrying too much regret. Lena didn't move. She just watched as he walked toward her, snow crunching beneath his boots. When he stopped a few feet away, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "You were right about me." She crossed her arms, fighting tears. "I was cruel." "No," he said softly. "You were honest. I needed that." She shook her head. "You shouldn't have come back." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But every mile away felt wrong. I left because I was afraid. Not of you, of feeling something I couldn't control." Her breath hitched. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I'm more afraid of never feeling it again." She looked away, tears slipping free despite herself. "You think it's that simple? You can just come back and—" "No," he interrupted gently. "I'm not here to fix anything. I just wanted to tell you the truth, before I lose the chance." He took a step closer. "You weren't convenient, Lena. You were the first real thing in my life that didn't ask me to be anyone else." Her lips trembled. "Why now?" "Because I finally learned what my mother meant," he said quietly. She said heart can't be earned. It has to be given. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folded envelope, the same one she'd refused days ago. I didn't come to pay you. I came to give you this. She frowned, hesitating before taking it. Inside wasn't a check, but a letter. She unfolded it slowly. It was written in elegant, looping handwriting. For the woman who reminded my son what it means to be human. Keep the fire burning for him when I no longer can. Marjorie Vale. Lena pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. She knew. Ethan nodded, voice breaking. She always did. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not asking for forever. Just one more chance to stand in the same light as you. Lena looked up, eyes glistening. You don't know how to quit, do you? He smiled through his tears. Not when it finally matters. She closed the distance between them then, small, trembling steps until she was right before him. The scarf fluttered between them, caught in the breeze like a bridge between past and present. I don't want promises, she said softly. Just truth. He nodded. Then here it is. I love you. Not because you saved her. Because you saved me. Her breath hitched, the world narrowing to the space between their words. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, Lena stopped running. She reached up, touched his face, and whispered, then stopped standing in the cold. He exhaled, a sound that was half laughter, half relief, and drew her into his arms. The scarf slipped from her shoulders and wrapped around them both as the wind lifted again, gentle and forgiving. When they finally pulled apart, the sunrise painted the snow in gold. Lena looked at him, smiling through her tears. You found your way back. He shook his head softly. You were my way back. That morning, they sat together on the porch steps, sharing coffee as the world thawed around them. No grand declarations, no dramatic endings, just warmth, quiet, and the hum of something real. Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. Maybe storms aren't meant to break us, she said softly. Maybe they clear the sky so we can finally see what's left. Ethan kissed her hair. Then this must be our sunrise. Have you ever almost lost something, or someone, because of fear, and had to fight your pride to make it right? Tell me below what love taught you about letting go and holding on. Spring came quietly that year. The mountain shed its last coat of snow, revealing earth that smelled of thaw and promise. The pines sighed in the warmer air, the sky opened wider, and the world, once frozen in grief, began to breathe again. Lena and Ethan had fallen into a rhythm neither of them had expected. Mornings started with coffee by the porch, afternoons with laughter echoing through the cabin as they argued about recipes or fixed the old heater. Nights ended in shared silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. Love, Lena realized, wasn't about grand gestures or rescue. It was about staying when it would be easier to leave. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. Lena raised a brow. Work. He smiled sheepishly. Trying to. But it's hard to focus when someone keeps humming. She chuckled, stirring a pot of soup. Get used to it. The forest has its own rhythm, and so do I. He leaned back, watching her move, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way she swayed unconsciously to a tune only she could hear. 4 years, his life had been made of numbers and meetings, strategy and survival. Now, it was made of moments. Imperfect, quiet, real moments. He closed the laptop. You know, he said, I've been thinking about something. Oh no, Lena teased. That usually means trouble. He smiled. Actually, I was thinking about staying. Her hand froze on the spoon. Staying? Here. He nodded. Not forever, maybe, but longer. I've spent years running a company that never needed me as much as I thought it did. Maybe it's time to build something that does. Lena turned, soft disbelief in her eyes. You'd really trade boardrooms for pine trees? He stood, crossing to her. I'd trade anything for peace. And I found it here, with you. Later that day, they walked the familiar path through the woods where she'd first met Marjorie Vale. The snow was gone, replaced by budding green and the faint song of early birds. The old woman's cabin stood still, the door slightly ajar, the same as it had been that fateful day. Lena paused at the threshold, her voice low. She was sitting right there when I found her, wrapped in that scarf. Ethan stepped beside her, eyes soft. She always loved this place, said it felt alive. They entered quietly. Dust had settled, but everything else remained untouched. The books, the rocking chair, the framed photo of Ethan as a boy. On the table lay a small box Lena hadn't noticed before. She frowned. Was this here before? Ethan shook his head. No. She opened it carefully. Inside was a folded note and two simple rings, silver, unpolished, handmade. Her hand trembled as she unfolded the note. To those who find love where storms once raged, remember, the truest vows are not spoken but lived. Lena looked up, eyes glistening. It's from her. Ethan swallowed hard, a smile breaking through his tears. Of course it is. She always had the last word. He took the smaller ring and held it between his fingers. It's not a proposal, not in the traditional sense, he said softly. But maybe it's a promise, that we don't run any more. Lena nodded, her tears shining like sunlight on snow. Then it's a promise I'll keep. They exchanged the rings right there, in the quiet light of the cabin where kindness had begun its circle. Weeks later, Lena's small world grew busier, not with chaos, but with life. Ethan had started a local foundation to help restore mountain shelters and community centers in memory of his mother. Lena helped organize art workshops for children from nearby towns. Their lives blended like threads in a single scarf, different colors, but stronger together. Sometimes, visitors would come up the mountain. They'd knock on Lena's door and ask if the stories were true, if a billionaire really gave it all up for love. She'd just smile and pour them tea. He didn't give it up, she'd say. He finally learned what was worth keeping. One evening, as dusk painted the sky, Lena sat by the fire writing in her journal again. Ethan walked in, his hair tousled from the wind. "You're still writing?" She smiled. "Old habits die hard. What's tonight's entry about?" She looked up at him, her eyes full of quiet wonder. "About how sometimes the people we save end up saving us, and how storms aren't always meant to destroy. Sometimes they're meant to reveal who we're supposed to find." He knelt beside her, resting his head against her knee. "Then I guess I owe a blizzard my life." She laughed, touching his hair gently. "And I owe it mine back." Later that night, she stepped outside while Ethan closed up the cabin. The stars spread wide across the velvet sky, clear, unbroken, endless. She lifted her gaze and whispered, "Thank you, Marjorie." A soft wind stirred through the trees, brushing her cheek like a hand, and she smiled, certain she wasn't alone. The next winter, the first snow came early. Lena and Ethan stood together on the porch, watching flakes drift down like blessings. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out the scarf, repaired, vibrant, whole. He wrapped it around her shoulders, his voice warm against her ear. "You kept the fire burning." She turned, eyes shimmering. You came home to it. They stood there, wrapped in light and snow and silence, the kind that didn't mean loneliness anymore, but peace. Have you ever helped someone, not realizing that moment would change your life forever? Tell me in the comments. Has kindness ever led you to something you didn't expect, maybe even love? Kindness always finds its way home. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.